Hello and welcome again to the Gaming News Canada show. And yes, it is me, your host, Steve McAllister. To somewhat paraphrase Charles Dickens, these are pretty darn good times for operators in the land of legal sports betting and online gaming, especially at this juncture on the calendar with the start of the NFL regular season and the countdown to the beginning of the NHL and NBA regular seasons, not to mention the upcoming Major League Baseball playoffs. This has many folks in the industry staying busy, including our two guests on this episode of the podcast. So without further ado, we welcome back to the Gaming News Canada show, the PR manager data insights for BetMGM, John Ewing, and his confrere, the managing and marketing operations, Paul Adams. Hey, Paul, you're a first timer on the podcast, so really appreciate you joining us.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Happy to be here.
Yeah, John, Steve, great to be back.
Yeah, thanks, John. We're going to bombard. I know we teed up a few topics in advance. We're going to call an audible a little bit later on Shohei Ohtani, but thanks again for getting back to the show. Hey, Paul, I want to start with you. And as I mentioned before we hit the record button, we often focus on sports betting topics on this show, and we kind of reference the enormous appetite for iGaming in Ontario kind of in passing. So I did want to dig a little bit deeper into this with you today because BetMGM's been very active on the iGaming front with some of your recent launches, Lightning Storm, WOF Casino, the Godfather, Charlie's Angels, and we're going to talk a little bit later about your new partnership with Brian Christopher from DC Ventures. But it gets lost sometimes, Paul, that iGaming is driving about 84% of the revenue for Ontario's regulated gambling environment. And I just wonder, I'm sure there are a couple of motivations for BetMGM to continue innovating in the iGaming space.
Yeah, absolutely, Steve. So when we launched in April 2022, that was BetMGM's first foray outside of the US. You could say it's their first international jurisdiction, as we're only in regulated markets. When we launched in Ontario, there was a concerted effort to focus equally on sports and casino. So right out of the gates, BetMGM clearly invested a lot of the resources from the US teams to focus on the launch. And then we also had boots on the ground and a pretty big team pretty quickly in equal parts sports and casino. So we had a lot of experts on the ground in both verticals. And I feel like that really contributed to the launch out of the gates, because a lot of gray market operators who transitioned to the regulated market had a 10 to 20 year head start. They were still in the industry, so they were doing something right. So for BetMGM to come in and have the success we did, it certainly was part of the strategy to focus on Ontario, focus equally on sports and casino, because it's very important to have a strong multi-product state. They help each other out. And then also, as you say, have a lot of unique content. So unique IP, unique games such as Godfather. We want to create an entertainment product for our customers. And I feel like BetMGM has been very successful in that.
And it seems when I look at some of the products you've launched, it kind of speaks to my vintage, I guess, the way I put it, Paul. Again, Charlie's Angels and the Godfather, and I just wonder, what goes into that strategy and targeting different demographics when you're producing these games?
Yeah, absolutely. So to get content that's only on BetMGM is very important, and we have a fantastic team that does this. Right now, we have over 3,000 games you can play on BetMGM. Some things are non-transactional, just again for entertainment value. And then for the games, it's just to catch people's eyeballs because they resonate with that product. So Godfather, Ace Ventura, go on and on about the unique content. But if it's exclusive to your company or as an operator, it is a benefit to have that. And that's something you can feature. Additionally, we have partnerships with NHL and other organizations, and then we can launch games using those IP. So we have NHL Blackjack, NHL Roulette, NHL Gold Blitz. So those are another way that we can tap into a market for the cross-sell point of view for sports players to play and see value in that and just have an exciting product.
Hey, Paul, you're based in Toronto, and John and I may have talked about this last time John was on the show, but I just wonder, we do see some uniqueness with the Ontario sports betting market, and we'll talk with John a little bit later about the NFL, and we know there's a strong, Buffalo Bills fan base in Southern Ontario, and in the western part of the province. Obviously, a lot of interest in Detroit Lions. I just wonder, is there something unique with Ontario customers in terms of iGaming when you contrast that with regulated iGaming in the US?
Yeah, that is very interesting. So I find in Europe, looking at data, a lot of times 5-10 games make up the lion's share of what people are playing. Ontario and even the US, it's really across a lot of different products depending on what their interest is. iGaming compared to the United States, I don't think there's as much differences as there is in sports. Sports, there's a heavy localization factor that goes with it. As you say, Buffalo Bills, NHL would have more success here. But iGaming, it is more comparable than sports.
Hey, John, I want to get to you because, the NFL season is launched with a bang, not unexpectedly. I think the American Gaming Association came out at the start of the season and estimated, I think, $35 billion are going to be bet on the NFL this season. That's unprecedented. I saw a post, Katie Kohler, BetMGM's communications person, shared a post from Adam Greenblatt a couple of weeks ago. I believe he said there was a 41% increase in live betting for week one compared to last year. Just some initial thoughts on what BetMGM is seeing with NFL betting so far.
Yeah, you're right. There's just more markets that are available. It used to just be the spread, total, and the money line, and all the action was pregame. But now you have those same markets live, as well as live markets for player props, for touchdowns. The touchdown market has really exploded. Bettors love being able to wager on who's going to score the first touchdown, who's going to score a touchdown at any point in the game. All of that is feeding into that growth that you just talked about.
Hey, John, I've listened to the sports betting executives for the NFL and the NBA and Major League Baseball speak at conferences in the past, and they talk about sports betting being an opportunity and another layer to marketing their athletes. And again, I'm just wondering, obviously that Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce, there are going to be some no-brainers when it comes to popularity of athletes with bettors. But I just wonder, are there some players who have emerged in 3 weeks, I guess, now in the NFL season? Some players or teams that have kind of emerged that it may have flown under the radar entering the season?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, names drive interest and storylines. So Caleb Williams, the first pick with the Bears, they've been a popular team. So is Williams props. But someone, and just from last night on Monday Night Football, Jaden Daniels, another rookie quarterback for the Commanders. He is now the favorite to win Offensive Rookie of the Year. He had a huge game against the Bengals in a upset. They were 7.5-point underdogs, which was a good outcome for the sports book. But these young quarterbacks that jump from college to the NFL, they really do drive interest because they're going to teams that have been struggling. So you get renewed interest from the local fan base, and then you get interest nationally as well.
Hey, in terms of Ontario, John, we just referenced a few moments ago about the Lions and Bills. Like, what are you seeing kind of those usual trends? I think this is the third year of the NFL and regulated sports betting in Ontario. Like, what are some of the trends that you're seeing early with that localization that Paul mentioned?
Yeah, Paul nailed it on the head. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's Ontario, Colorado, Michigan, wherever, right? The local fans support their hometown teams. They do it with their hearts. They do it with their wallets. Nationally, I mean, just in all of our markets, the Lions are the most bet team to win the Super Bowl. I mean, it's pretty spread between a number of teams. But when you look at the Bills, specifically in Ontario, so Bills are maybe like the 7th most bet team when it comes to money on the Super Bowl, just in all the markets we service. In Ontario, though, they're the most bet team, and they have almost a quarter of all the money is coming on them. And we've seen just from last night, because Josh Allen had a huge game. The Bills looked great in their victory on Monday. Since the week 3 slate ended, they've had nearly 40% of all bets, and that's not just in Ontario, that's in all the U.S. as well, have come in on the Bills to win the Super Bowl. So they were 11-1 last week. Now they're 8-1. So they're creeping up there as one of the favorites, and they're starting to get a lot of support too.
Hey, I'm going to ask both of you guys, and I was on the Sports Business Radio show out of Vancouver last weekend, and we were talking about uh, Shohei Ohtani, and again that localization, and I just remember from covering the Toronto Blue Jays back in the early '90s when they won their back-to-back World Series titles, and we used to talk about when fans are excited about teams, obviously it translates into bigger attendance, it translates into bigger merchandise sales, it translates into bigger television ratings. It allows those teams to go out and increase corporate sponsorship revenue. And Paul, maybe start with you on this. I mean, the fact that it's an exciting time to be a Lions and Bills fan, and that hasn't always been in the case in the past 20 years. The timing is pretty serendipitous for BetMGM and other operators to come in this marketplace with the Bills and now the Lions riding a bit of a wave.
Yeah, absolutely. And for Shohei, it's so exciting what he's doing. It's great when you get these storylines. We just wish he was doing it as a Toronto Blue Jay. That would have been a little bit better for us, especially from a localization standpoint. But absolutely, when a team is winning and they're exciting and there's eyeballs on it and there's significant buzz going around, it helps. So for the Bills and Lions to be as good as they are at this time serves all operators to their advantage. Toronto Blue Jays, on the other hand, didn't have such a great season, so it can go either way. It would have been nice if we were the Blue Jays of the 2010s at that time. So if a team is successful, naturally there'll be more interest and people would be more likely to bet on the game.
Hey John, I'm gonna make you put on your PR hat to bail out Paul here because you just put a dagger through the hearts of Blue Jays fans with that Ohtani reference. But again, I think two parts. Just what the Bills and Lions success has meant to BetMGM and here in Ontario, and talk a little bit about the Ohtani effect.
Yeah, well, it just made me think of. Do you remember just beginning of the year when Ohtani was trying to decide, or where before the season started, where he was going to play, and there was tracking private jets, and maybe one was going to Toronto, and it actually caused the odds to shift for the World Series. So that's a fun aspect of free agency, of the betting interest in these sports. So in terms of again, the Lions being good, the Bills being good. That is great for BetMGM's business, and it's because we have such passionate fans in those markets, and then nationally as well. Again, quarterback star players drive a lot of the narratives, which in turn drives interest from bettors in games. And going back to Ohtani, he's been on a tear. Obviously, he was 9-1 before the season started to win the MVP in the National League. You could have got him at plus money back in like mid-June. He was still battling Bryce Harper at the time. But since then, it's just been all Ohtani, and all the money has come in on him too late. The odds are off the board currently, but he closed at minus 10,000. He was a huge favorite here in the last month. He's been on fire. He creates his own club, the 50-50. He's got 6 games left starting tonight. I mean, there's a chance we might see 60-60, which is just pretty wild to think about, especially considering he had never stolen more than 30 bases in a season here in the major leagues. I guess maybe he was saving his legs for pitching, but without having to go to the mound every 5 days or so, maybe he's had more energy to swipe a few bases.
It's interesting too, John. Steve Simmons, the columnist for the Toronto Sun, had in a Sunday Notes column on Sunday talked about the season that Aaron Judge was having, and I've been thinking about that the last month or so. That Ohtani's season's overshadowed Judge, who's having an amazing season in his own right. And just wondering again, having the Dodgers and the Yankees in the playoffs. I mean, people 10 years ago would have talked about how, Major League Baseball executives are rubbing their hands about the television ratings that they're going to see nationally. And obviously both the Yankees and the Dodgers are going to see that increased revenue from attendance and those ancillary revenues. I would think, again, from a sports betting perspective, having 2 superstars of that ilk in the postseason is only good news.
Of course. Yeah, that'll drive more interest. I mean, I know right now I can hear the traders in the back of my head saying, we'd love to see them make deep runs, have, 5, 7 game long series, and then for them to lose in the World Series or, just slightly before. Because the Dodgers, the Yankees, those are two teams that even when they're not good, get a bunch of support from bettors. And this year with them playing well, are two of our biggest liabilities to win the World Series, to win their respective leagues as well. So, and anytime Judge or Otani's playing, they're the most bet players to hit a home run. So you got the sportsbook always sweating one of them going long, and they've done it all season long.
Hey, John, I'm one tier below a casual bettor, so this might appear to be a dumb question, but again, with Ohtani, just because the odds aren't likely to be real good for a bettor, why will there continue to be interest on Ohtani in say a playoff series, and why are people willing to lay money on him given the odds aren't going to be that great in favor of the customer?
Well, I mean, in a single game, Ohtani's still going to be plus money, which means, let's say you bet $100 to win 300 that he's going to hit a home run. Will that happen in that game? That's going to vary. Obviously, there's variance from game to game, but since you're not going to have to bet a lot to win a little, bettors are still going to be interested, even if you had to, again, bet 200 to win 100. He's so popular. He's had so much success. I would still see interest from bettors in Ohtani, in Judge, and all of these big name players that continue to hit a lot of home runs all season.
Hey, Paul, you as a marketing person, I just wonder, obviously BetMGM's done partnerships with Jamie Foxx and other celebrities. Connor McDavid and Wayne Gretzky have been part of the BetMGM stable. Just in terms of an iGaming perspective, is there an appetite to tie online games to a professional athlete, or does that work along with other celebrities or franchises like the Godfather?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do have the partnership with Wayne Gretzky, and we do have his name in a game. There's Gretzky Power Pucks that one of our game suppliers created. It's a fun game, but that's another example of something we can cross-sell to. And your question earlier of what content is more localized in Ontario or Canada, it is the NHL IP. Those games over-index in Ontario versus the United States for obvious reasons, right? So the NHL Roulette, NHL Blackjack, Gretzky Power Pucks. So there are opportunities to create games with athletes. It's just the timing to do it and what game, because the product needs to be successful as well. But that is one example.
Hey, John, that's a good segue to the upcoming NHL season. And we want to talk to you a little bit about some of the early futures betting you're seeing. And I think in Canada, there's a cause for a little bit of excitement here, or more excitement than normal. I mean, obviously the Edmonton Oilers came really close to winning the Stanley Cup last year. Vancouver Canucks fans are excited about the resurgence of the team there. Toronto Maple Leafs teams are still clinging on to the hope of ending that drought that goes back to 1967. And even in Ottawa, where the Senators have struggled, there's some renewed optimism around that team, including the announcement last week that they're eventually going to be an arena built downtown. And that's not a matter of if it happens, but when it happens now. Can you give us a little bit of insight on that, what you're seeing with the early action on the NHL?
Yeah. So the Oilers are the favorites to win. As you said, they're plus 850. Maple Leafs are sitting at 15-1. So they're right there. There's a pretty decent group of contenders to lift the cup. In general, it's not really surprising. Oilers are the most bet team. They have about 27% of all money has been wagered on them to win the Stanley Cup. But as we said, just with the NFL, it's the same with the NHL. In Ontario, they like to support their local team. So they have almost 50% of the money is on the Maple Leafs to, as you said, they haven't had one since 67. So maybe this is the year they get it done. At least that's what the local fans are hoping for.
I guess the other piece of that too, John, is when you look at these franchises too, especially Edmonton and Toronto, I mean, Austin Matthews Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid are arguably three of the best 5 players in the game right now. And again, I would think that's very attractive to your customers.
Oh yeah, McDavid is the most bet to win the Hart Trophy in all markets. That's the same in Ontario. Same thing with Matthews. The only thing we see in Ontario is that there's just more bets and more money on them. With players, it's a little. I think the markets always reflect each other a little bit more. But in general, with McDavid and Matthews, yeah, they're supported really strongly in all markets as well as in Ontario.
Hey, John, and on the flip side, the Toronto Raptors are in a rebuilding phase right now, and I guess unless you think of Scotty Barnes as a superstar, there isn't, certainly a different landscape than it was in the Vince Carter days and the Kawhi Leonard year and DeMar DeRozan and Kyle Lowry. But do you see kind of a corresponding dip in terms of interest with Raptors fans?
This one's a little tougher just because their expectations are so low. Right now, they're 1,000 to 1 to win the NBA championship. They're 500 to 1 to win the East. So there's still a higher percentage of bets on them compared to the rest of the markets, but it's not significant. You still have the teams like the Celtics, the Thunder, the Knicks. The Knicks are going to be really strongly supported across all states in Ontario, but Ontario as well. That's a little bit more, or closer to them in terms of distance. So Knicks are a very popular team.
And to follow up on that, Steve, NBA seems to be driven more by star power. They're so good at putting those players to the forefront that there's always going to be an appetite and interest to bet on those games, those teams, and those players. So I find it oddly that impacts us the least, the fact that the Raptors are down versus, say, if the Leafs or the Blue Jays were down in terms of overall handle and bets in the league.
Hey, Paul, that reminds me too. You do wonder. I mean, we look at that Team Canada roster at the Olympics in Paris this summer, and obviously it was a disappointing game for the Canadian men's Olympic team. But when you look at the star players on that team, including Shea and Jamal Murray, to that point, do you see? Is there more interest among Ontario customers for BetMGM and those Canadian-born players now?
Yeah, absolutely. And they both had deep runs in the playoffs, right? Jamal Murray obviously won the championship the year prior, and then Shea had a great run. So absolutely, there was so much excitement and so much confidence we would medal. That's not the way sports work. You can put the best team on paper in a game, and in a one-game elimination, anything can happen. So even though they didn't get the job done, the fact that we can put a roster together of that many high-caliber NBA players is phenomenal. And I think part of it is the Vinsanity effect. I remember being a kid, and when he played in Toronto, it was unbelievable, electrifying. And then all of a sudden, you have all these great players come out afterwards. I think there is some sort of impact of getting the Raptors, having Vince Carter, and then people wanting to emulate that, such as RJ Barrett and them. So yeah, exciting times. They still have another chance. But it's great to see for sure.
Yeah, and we're recording this podcast on September 24th, about 24 hours after the news came out that the Raptors are going to retire Vince Carter's jersey. And again, still a very, a lightning rod, a guy whose departure from the Raptors was messy, but at the same time, an awful lot of people much smarter about basketball than I am credit Carter for really helping basketball reach new heights in this country. Hey, John, just quickly, just off, that talking to Paul about the impact of those Canadian players. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, just the Thunder are the most bet team to win the NBA championship in all markets, and SGA is the most bet player to win MVP. His odds have moved from plus 650 to plus 475. So he's right there in that top tier with Luka, Jokic, and Embiid as the favorites to win MVP this year.
Hey, Paul, before we wrap up, we never get through a podcast, it seems, these days without talking about Alberta. And you spent a couple of days out there in the province this week. And again, I think there's a lot more questions than answers right now about regulated gambling coming to the province there. Just any thoughts from a BetMGM perspective about again, I think it is a matter of when the province is going to launch a regulated industry there. But just some thoughts from a BetMGM perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. So iGo had great success with the regulatory framework they implemented in Ontario. You can't put it on automation. They can't, and have a hands-off approach. So the industry here in Ontario, 2.5 years in, has evolved and will continue to evolve. It will never be static as data and information comes in and they make appropriate decisions from a business perspective and player health perspective. Alberta, we're still waiting for them to build that framework, but Ontario provided such a great example of what can be, and they can take a lot of the great ideas and tweak it based on, again, reuse the word localization. What matters to the players in Alberta? What do they see that this might not be the best approach, but overall it's going to come. It'll be the first iGaming product that BetMGM will launch since Ontario in 2022. So for me personally, on the casino side, I'm very excited about that. But it's just a lot of optimism, just waiting for information. It's a lot of work to get a brand in market. To build the framework is just that times, let's say 51, if there's 51 operators. So we're excited. We'll stay close to it, and we'll be ready to go day one.
Hey, John, just last question, just on Alberta, like, is that something, does your department or do the trade guys, are they looking at Alberta or a pending new market and maybe thinking about some of the opportunities that might be there? Again, knowing that in Alberta is obviously Flames and the Oilers, there's a passionate fan base. Western Canada tends to be a little bit more passionate about the CFL than Eastern Canada. And again, you're probably going to have those different allegiances to NFL teams in that part of the country. Is that something that you're looking ahead to?
Yeah, I mean, the traders are always conscious of what markets they're offering and which teams are going to be more popular. So they'd have keep an eye on that, like you said, the local teams in different markets, so that they can be prepared to adjust lines as needed. And hey, maybe we start expanding more into Canada, we can start offering more CFL markets as well for games, which that betting interest drives traders, which drives more opportunities. It's a circle there. So that would be maybe one thing that the trading team could start doing more of.
John Ewing is the PR manager, Data Insights. You can find him on X/Twitter at John Ewing. Paul Adams is the manager of marketing operations for BetMGM. Hey guys, so good to have you. I will apologize to Katie Kohler. We didn't get a Philadelphia Flyers update into this podcast. We'll have to do a dedicated podcast, John, at some point where we just get Katie on him and we talk about the glory years of the Flyers. And again, a team that's had a pretty long Stanley Cup drought too. But I'm sure I know I'll be hearing from Katie as soon as I stop this podcast.
She's saying, I can tell, Eagles, Phillies. Katie is a Philly girl, so she could go all day about it.
Yeah, Paul, we got to get Katie up here to Toronto and immerse her in Toronto sports trivia and maybe I think Katie was at the Hockey Hall of Fame for a visit back in June during the Canadian Gaming Summit, but we may have to Canadianize her a little bit more.
Oh, do you know the trivia question? Who pitched when Joe Carter hit the home run in 1993? She would know that.
Yeah. That's an important one. That's an important one. Let's leave it.
Yeah.
Let's leave it there. That's it for this edition of the Gaming News Canada show. Thanks again to John Ewing and Paul Adams for joining us. As always, you can find this and all our podcasts at gamingnewscanada.ca and also on the various podcast platforms. Thanks everybody so much for listening to us, and we will see you again very soon.
Thank you for listening to the Gaming News Canada show. Sign up for our newsletter at gamingnewscanada.ca. Follow Steve McAllister on LinkedIn. Message Steve if you're interested in being a sponsor or featured guest.